These are 4 popular dog foods from Target that I might reconsider based on lawsuits, misleading marketing, and questionable ingredients. And this is coming from a nutritionist and researched pet parent that has over 5 years of experience in the pet food industry. My hot take on Rachel Ray's Nutrish, their chicken recipe, is it's a red flag food for me. In the first 6 ingredients, they have multiple red flag ingredients: soybean meal, corn, wheat, peas, and sorghum. I want ingredients that are species appropriate, which means foods or ingredients dogs were designed biologically to digest. So this is primarily, but not only, whole meat, real meat sources, organ meat, real crushed bone or calcium sources, and some produce in the food. I also see a bit of ingredient splitting, and if you've been following along, make sure you click that subscribe button. You know that this is a misleading marketing tactic where a brand will take lower quality ingredients, let's say corn, a very cheap filler ingredient that we know that dogs absolutely do not need in their diet, and they'll break it up into sub-ingredients to make corn as a whole ingredient appear lower on the ingredient deck. And now we're gonna navigate to the guaranteed analysis together, which is on the back of the bag, and the protein percent is only 23, which I personally look for at least 27, ideally 28% or higher, because remember, based on research, dogs are facultative or scavenging carnivores, meaning they need to get majority of their protein from animal meat sources, not that they only need meat, organs, and bones in their diet. They do thrive in the presence of micronutrient dense produce. So from the rooftops, what is the most expensive ingredient in pet food? Meat. So if a brand is trying to lower their cost, especially these brands that are big corporate conglomerate owned, where are they going to reduce their cost at? Sourcing meat. But they know that pet parents that are informed, like you and I, they know that we want to see a higher protein percent. So how are they going to make that protein percent seem higher without raising costs? They're going to find alternative protein sources, which may not be the most species or biologically appropriate for our dogs. So when we look at the guaranteed analysis and we see this protein percent, the real question is how much of this is actually coming from animal meat protein. And not to mention, this brand has multiple lawsuits against them. They had one where there were claims to have found dog DNA in their pet food, and another where there were claims that there was glyphosate, which is what's found in Roundup to kill weeds, and they add natural flavoring. And you'll see that as very commonly found in many pet foods. It's something I avoid unless I can get in writing from the manufacturer what is included in that, because natural flavoring can include bark, leaves, almost any protein. So let's say you buy a bag of chicken food because your dog doesn't do well on beef. That natural flavoring could include beef, it could include essential oils, seafood. Because it's not fully transparently disclosed, it makes me question and wonder, but it's not all bad. I am not anti-Rachel Ray or any one single brand, even though it may seem like that. They do add taurine in the food, and I know many people and pet parents have concerns about their dog getting enough taurine. They do have chicken as the first ingredient. There are some brands out there where the first ingredient is rice or corn. Plus, and this is important, especially in today's economy, it is on the more affordable end. And I'll talk about if you are feeding this food, your dog, you feel like is doing well on it, what we can do to boost the bowl in just a moment. But let's talk about Nutro, and then we'll get into Kindful and a couple others. Specifically looking at their chicken and brown rice recipe, 5 out of their first 8 ingredients are how I would consider starchy, lower quality filler type ingredients. Now I do like that chicken is the first ingredient, but then it's quickly followed by rice, a chicken meal, another rice. This is what we call, again, ingredient splitting. We see rice in here 3 times in the first several ingredients. They also have a lot of meal ingredients in here. Am I anti-meal ingredients? No. As long as I can get in writing from a decision maker at the manufacturer of the sourcing of that meal, because by definition, per the FDA, meal ingredients are rendered, and rendered ingredients can, of course, not always include lower quality 4D meats. An example would be dead, deceased, dying, or down. These are meats that are unfit for human consumption. Then if we look at the last half of the ingredients, we're gonna see over 20 vitamin synthetics. This is a premix that brands, particularly kibble, are going to spray and add on after the kibble has been ultra processed and extruded during the manufacturing process and cooked at very high temperatures to add some nutrients back into the food. Let's jump to the front of the bag and see if we see anything that looks misleading. First red flag I see is it states nice and large that the ingredients in the food is made without GMO, which is great. But then on the same front of the bag in small fine print, it says ingredients may actually be GMO or have exposure to GMO ingredients. So that to me is just highly misleading, but they must not realize and think that you and I, as informed pet parents, I know I say that a lot, but that's what our community is, that we don't read. The reality is we do. We take the time because we care and because we've taken the time to research. It also has big pictures of fresh meat on the front of the bag, but the protein percent in this is even less than Rachael Ray at 22% when we look at the guaranteed analysis. And the carbohydrate percent in the food, again, this is how you calculate it if you want to calculate on your dog's food after this video, is about 50%. But it's not all bad. This food is accessible. I see it everywhere. It's relatively affordable, though it's about 40% more than Rachael Ray. So it's about 16 cents an ounce versus about 9 cents an ounce. I know it varies based on where you live regionally, but they do have some whole food ingredients before salt, and chicken is the first ingredient. So I'm not gonna say this is the absolute worst food in the world. It's just almost for what it is, in my personal opinion, seems a little overpriced. Now, this next brand is one that actually surprised me for a few reasons, and it's the I and Love You brand that's seeming to be really popular in Target, though I think it is available in other places as well. And it's something y'all ask me for. If there is a brand, by the way, that you want me to do my personal review on, please leave that in the comments. And if you see another brand in there that you want reviewed, make sure you like that comment just so I can see how many of you really want the review. And then we're gonna talk about a brand at Target that I might consider feeding if I was choosing a food at Target. And I have to give a kudos to this brand, I and Love You, because I reach out to brands. That's how I get the information I have, in addition to doing research on the manufacturing website as well as the packaging. And they responded to me within 24 hours. It is a baked kibble, which if I'm gonna feed a kibble, I do prefer ones that are cooked at lower temperatures. The more we cook and process foods, the more proteins can be denatured, the more nutrients can be depleted. This is common food science. And so this is why a lot of brands also will spray on these vitamin synthetic packs. So when I see a kibble brand that is baked at lower temperatures than traditional extruded kibble, it does pique my interest a little bit because the nutrients may be a tad bit more bioavailable. And the thing I love the most about this food is they encourage pet parents to add water to the food, which typically I'm not a big advocate of just adding plain water to kibble. I prefer, if possible, to add water with something. Let's say like bone broth, which is basically water with collagen and protein in it, no salt added, of course, or adding some raw goat milk, or adding something that has some nutrient value and moisture in it instead of just plain water. Although I'm not against that. Kibble is naturally dehydrating to our dogs because it is void of almost all moisture. Remember, dogs biologically are meant to eat a less processed, moisture-rich, fresh food diet, and they get a lot of their moisture requirements from the food they eat. And if we're feeding a primarily or only kibble diet and we're not making sure they're getting enough fluids, they can be chronically dehydrated.
A dog who is fed only kibble is running around in a chronic state of dehydration because the kibble needs moisture to be digested. And where is that moisture coming from? Well, if they're not a big drinker, that moisture is coming from their body cells. And that's not good.
But when we turn the bag around and look at the ingredients, there are quite a few meal ingredients. When we look at the protein percent in this food compared to the others so far, is pretty insane. It's at 28%. Their carbohydrate percent is only about 34% in this baked line, which is way lower than the other brands that we looked at before. So that's something that is really attractive to me. They have around the same amount as synthetics, vitamin synthetic premixes. And just like the other brands mentioned today, this is a feed grade food. I personally prefer pet foods that are human grade, meaning foods that are in ingredients that are deemed fit for human consumption. Feed grade doesn't always mean bad quality, but they are foods or ingredients that are deemed unfit for human consumption, and in my opinion has more reason to hesitate when picking a brand. It's more research that we need to do to make sure that they're not using 4D meats, for example, dead, diseased, dying, or down animals. And I like the fact that this food is pretty accessible. I see it everywhere. It looks like you can order online as well, but it is over double the cost of the other brands. It's about 24 cents per ounce. And really quickly, I wanna look at their more economical or affordable line, their essentials line, which is only about 16 or 19 cents per ounce, so it's cheaper. It actually has a higher percent of protein under the guaranteed analysis at 30%. The problem is if we go to the ingredients, we start seeing that there's a lot of legumes in here. I'm not anti-legumes by any means, or lentils or peas or anything like that, but when they're in combination, so many in a food like this, with highly rendered, highly processed meal ingredients, I just start worrying about the quality of the food in general. And that's really representative in the price point. And the carbohydrates is still only about 35%, so lower than the Nutro, lower than the Rachel Ray. It's apparently made without GMOs, so I do like that. Now you may be asking me, Rachel, are there any kibbles at Target that you would feed your dog? And the answer is probably not, but if I had to, this next brand might be the one I would do, or maybe even one of the I and Love Yous. Like, let's say there was only Target around me and budget was a big concern. If you do want to see my dog food list of the brands that I have done extensive research on that I personally love, respect, and will feed my dogs, it'll be linked in the description for you. You can check after this video, or you can go to my website, RachelFusaro.com, under my dog food. I also have free vet-approved guides on there for meal toppers or how to start feeding a raw dog food if you're interested, as well as all of my favorite products on my shop page. But if I had to pick a kibble specifically from Target, it might be Kindful. Looking at their chicken recipe, it's pretty affordable at about 10 cents per ounce. The protein is pretty average. It's not going to be as high as the I and Love You at 24%, but the carbohydrates are still relatively low compared to the Nutros or the Rachel Ray. They also don't have any corn, soy, or wheat, which I do appreciate in a food. Chicken is the first ingredient. They also have some meal ingredients. They have some vitamin synthetics, so similar commentaries before, but I think why I would probably go for this one is cost value. So when I'm looking at a food, just because it's super cheap, if the quality is so poor in how I would consider it, it's just not even worth that cost. This food seems like it's a good mid-range for what the cost is for what you get. And I'm gonna be frank, when I look at the front of the bag, I don't see a ton of misleading marketing. They kind of tell you for what it is. It's a fairly budget brand for a fairly mid to lower mid-level kibble based on my opinion. Again, this is all my opinion. I'm not bashing the brand. I also like the fact that it is readily available. We got an itchy beard. Look at Marlo there. It's readily available, so you can find it at your local Targets. One note here is that even though this is you okay? Even though this is a chicken food, they do add turkey meal. And the reason I point that out is some dogs have sensitivities to proteins, so make sure you watch out for that if you are feeding this food. I wouldn't feed any kibble, especially these, without adding a little bit of pet safe, real, fresh foods. So easy, quick example is if you were to take your dog's bowl of kibble and you were to take out about 10% of it, so just a small amount, and replace that with real, fresh, whole foods that are pet safe. A couple examples: canned sardines with no salt, no seasoning added, no oil really, just in the plain water. You could do some steamed plain broccoli. You could do some watermelon without any of the seeds, or chopped apple, spinach that's been minced. Add a little bit of that in the bowl with the kibble. And you do that at every meal. This way your dog is going to get their complete and balanced base bowl, but then they get the powerful benefits of the real whole foods. They get the moisture by adding some no salt added plain bone broth. You can make your own plain bone broth at home, or you can get a pet safe one. Raw goat milk, raw goat kefir are other great additions. Plain coconut water with no sugar, nothing added, just plain organic coconut water is something else that's really, really tasty to add in the bowl. I also love adding plain pumpkin puree, or some of these baby foods that have just plain whole food ingredients that are pet safe, are just great ways to add nutrient dense, moisture, and whole food nutrition. If you want more ideas on how to add toppers to the bowl, I have a free guide on my website that is vet approved at RachelFusaro.com, or click the video right here. And if you want to learn more about what I feed my dogs, click the video right here. And I hope you have a beautiful day. Goodbye.